Hey everyone, I just wanted to present a short video elaborating a little bit more on some of the issues in the assessment 2, which covers the communication model, the objectives, and also the creative strategy for developing an integrated marketing communications program. So when we talk about advertising and IMC objectives, this is really the one of the beginning steps, one of the early steps in developing an IMC program, looking at the promotional mix, particularly in consumer goods marketing. But of course, it also has significant relevance in B2B activities as well. It's looked at in Chapter 7. It focuses on the differences between sales and communications objectives, looks at the Dagmar model and the different kind of approaches you can take to setting objectives, and looking at the characteristics of good advertising goals and objectives. In addition, it looks at some of the limitations of the models and then discusses the budgeting process. Now just remember, this is only a brief overview of the chapter, and you should be reading the detailed chapter in any event. So in terms of the learning objectives, we want to focus on why you need to set objectives for advertising and promotion. Have a look at the different, the relationship between the promotional objectives and marketing. Have a look at the aspects of sales-oriented objectives, compare them, describe the budgeting process, look at the differences in perspectives in terms of budgeting, and compare the different methods of setting budgets. So we know the changing media environment is forcing marketeers to reallocate their advertising spending. We've seen a dramatic growth in the use of online promotion, online advertising. It's forced organisations to change and reevaluate the kinds of goals and objectives which they base their promotional strategies on. One of the first things to look at are the value of objectives. So there are a lot of companies who don't set very, very good objectives. They don't really understand or value the reason for setting good objectives. And the first reason we're talking about communications. Specific objectives serve as communication devices. It allows the facilitation between various groups within the organisation. It can allow facilitation between an advertising agency and the client. It also helps avoid a lot of the problems involved through confusion. It also helps in planning and decision making. So certainly when you set an objective, that will lead you in a certain direction and definitely will help with decision making. I think one of the things that advertising and promotional planners, they're faced with a number of strategic options, including what kind of creative media, what kind of creative approach, what kind of media to use, how much money they have to spend, and also an analysis of what they need to do in sales promotion, if at all. So the kind of objectives which are specified will help in this area. There's also the measurement and evaluation of results. If you don't have clear objectives in IMC, it's going to be very hard to measure the results and then evaluate the nature of whether you talk about integrated marketing communications objectives. The first thing we need to look at are the differences between marketing and communications objectives. So first of all, let's talk about marketing objectives. Basically they occur in the firm's marketing plan. They're statements of what is to be accomplished by the overall marketing program within a given time period. They're usually defined in terms of SMART goals, and the measures, the indicators could be sales volume, market share, profits, or return on investment. So when we look at communications objectives, these are statements of what various aspects of the IMC program will accomplish. They're based on the communication tasks that are required to deliver the appropriate message. So basically what needs to happen is that you take the general marketing goals and then you translate them into specific communication goals and objectives. When we talk about sales versus communications objectives, so some people argue that the only reason for a firm spending money on advertising and promotion is to sell products or services. That in itself can be a big problem. So it could be that sales requires the function of a whole range of other marketing mix variables such as product design, quality, packaging, etc. The ability to achieve your sales objectives could be due to a whole range of other factors, including macro factors covering the economy, competition, and consumer trends. Also, there's the carryover effect. So in other words, if I advertise in March, I may not get the effects until July or August, depending on the particular product or service category. And sales objectives don't help guide the direction of those people who are doing the planning and executing a promotional program. Okay, so we know that sales objectives are appropriate. If you, for example, are running a direct marketing program and you can say, well, I want to increase sales over the next 3 months. I'm going to run a direct marketing program targeted to a specific group of customers. That's fine. Then I think you can link advertising with sales. But these are very specific circumstances. It may be that you're running a promotional program or an IMC program to increase brand awareness, or to focus on a particular policy or government lobbying position, which may only be indirectly related to sales. So when we talk about communications objectives, the whole purpose is to communicate to the various target markets or target groups or stakeholders which you've identified from the situation analysis. Basically, most organisations use some kind of hierarchical model, which is outlined in Chapter 5 in terms of setting advertising or general IMC objectives. And so the logic is that consumers pass through successive stages of the response hierarchy, and that advertising or promotions or all major aspects of the IMC program are used to help move consumers or stakeholders through that hierarchy. And that leads to the discussion of the communication effects pyramid. So that's in figure 7.2. And essentially it talks about all of the tasks involved moving consumers to higher levels in the pyramid to get them to where they trial and regular use of the product or service or meet the objective. So you start off obviously with an awareness level and then work your way through to trial. Now this is more outlined in terms of a sales-oriented approach. However, if, for example, your goal in assessment 1 is to look at the impact of the negativity of the Banking Royal Commission on the Commonwealth Bank, then the communications effects pyramid will be different. There are some problems with communications objectives. And some people say, well, look, they're only of value if they result in sales. Now, particularly if we're looking at, say, the Banking Royal Commission, then one of the aspects of an IMC program would be to improve the reputation of the resulting organisation. If it's the AMP that you're looking at, or the Commonwealth Bank, etc., then these are going to be some of the considerations taken into account. So while sales may be an ultimate goal, the immediate focus of the communications, IMC communications program, won't be on sales related. So this leads to a discussion of DAGMAR, or DAGMAR, otherwise known as Defining Advertising Goals for Measured Advertising Results. It was developed by Russell Colley for setting advertising objectives. And essentially it's about a goal which involves communication tasks, a task that is specific and measurable. When you get back to the old SMART goals, and I mean they're spelled out in a slightly different manner here, but essentially you get to the same point. You want concrete, measurable tasks. So you need a precise statement of what appeal or message the advertiser or promoter wants to communicate to the target audience. So this is absolutely critical. If you can't measure it, you can't analyse and evaluate the results. So next we're looking at defining the target audience. And I'm hoping that you started to really have a good look at this in the development of the situation analysis. And you need to ask the question, who are the people or the organisations that I want to get my message through to? I need to be very, very precise, very careful in terms of identifying specific organisations or specific targeted group of customers or stakeholders. Then I need to set, well, okay, so I've identified the target audience. Now I need to identify a benchmark. What kind of change do I want to see happen? Do I want to see an awareness level increase from 50 to 70%? Do I want to see the level of trust in the organisation go from a 3.5 to a 5? Do I want to see the overall reputation of the organisation go from X to Y? So the objectives need to specify how much change or movement is being sought. And so obviously you need to have some way of measuring it, whether you have a scale from marketing, a series of questions that you ask, whether it's part of your key performance indicators. You need to have some idea of how you're going to measure the changes caused by the IMC program which you're contemplating. The next aspect is the specified time period. So how long is it going to take you to achieve your objectives? For example, if you think that you can achieve the objectives in 3 months, well, that becomes a 3-month objective. So it may be that you want to try and increase the trust level from 3.5 to 4 within a 3-month period. So it needs to be appropriate for the communication objectives. So when you're looking at an assessment of DAGMAR, there are some issues that need to be taken into account. It's not all clear cut. There are some grey aspects. There could be problems with the response hierarchy. There could be issues with the sales objectives. There could be issues with practicality and the costs associated with what it is you want to achieve. Some people argue that the DAGMAR approach inhibits creativity, even though I take the view that it's much better to have SMART kind of goals rather than not, so that at least you can start to measure how effective your program is. Okay, so let's talk about some of the different approaches to budgeting that you can take. You could, for example, have a top-down approach. So top-down approach is where management identify through their own research what they think is a reasonable goal. It could be how much money they have. It's called the affordable method. Could be an arbitrary allocation, or it could be a percentage of sales. All of these kinds of methods are used by a whole range of organisations. Could also be based on competitive parity. In other words, how much are your competitors spending? Could be based on return on investment. So that's a top-down approach. There are also other approaches, such as what we call a build-up approaches. Could be based on the objective and task method. And this is more likely to be relevant to the kind of IMC program which you're developing in this course. So it's talking about the steps required in using the objective and task. So the process involves establishing objectives, determining the specific tasks, and then determining the cost associated with each task, and then monitoring. Another method is payout planning. So how long does it take to recover the money that you put into it? Some people use quantitative models, but these are not all that successful and it also depends on the kind of industry in which you're in. If you're in a relatively stable industry and demand doesn't change that much, quantitative models are okay. But if you're in an industry factored by uncertainty, wild fluctuations in sales, quantitative models can be quite difficult. In terms of allocating the budget, there are a number of factors which influence marketeers. Could be the kind of policies which you have. Corporate politics may dictate that you can only allocate a certain amount. Size of the market, the larger the market, the more money you might have to allocate it to it. Also the market potential, the market share goals are relevant as well. Market potential, market share goals. So there are some aspects, the economies of scale in advertising or promotion, some of the organisational characteristics, the structure of the organisation, the politics, who's involved. Do you have any experts? Tell me about the characteristics of the decision maker, the negotiating channels, etc. So I think that's about all I wanted to talk about in this section in chapter 7. So